All right. Good morning again, everyone. Nicole Crane with the Association of Business and Industry. We're expecting a few more people, but I know we all have a busy day ahead of us, and I know that it's nice and hot outside. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for participating in our regional meeting. This one is technically the Southeast Iowa regional meeting. We're really excited to kind of revamp things and have a special guest speaker. Really want these to be engaging. Thank you for your support this last legislative session, for all the support that you provide to the association throughout the year. It was a big legislative year. Many of you on this Zoom have heard our updates from the public policy team of JD Davis and Brad Hartkoff throughout the session. And so some of this will be review, but also I think this is an opportunity as we look to set the stage for 2026. As some of you have seen, we want to just thank you for our regional meeting sponsors: Alliant Energy, Arconic, SIPCO, Cox, Hormel Foods, and Tyson Foods. It's a great, I just see actually, we'll let John in. John from Cox Communication is actually on the Zoom today. So thank you again, Cox and John, for your support. With that, I'm just going to turn it over to JD Davis and Brad Hartkoff, who are the experts at the state legislature, and looking forward to hearing their updates. And also, for those of you who may not be familiar with ABI, they're going to share a little bit of background with us. So JD, I think I'm turning it over to you.
All right, Nicole, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, we keep these regional meetings open not just to ABI members, but also to other interested parties. And so, real briefly, a little bit about ABI. We're the oldest statewide business organization in the state of Iowa. We got started in 1903. We have a head count of employees of about 330,000 Iowans. We have member facilities in all 99 counties across the state. The founding in 1903 was a common purpose founding. Iowa wanted to advertise that they were open for manufacturing business. And so manufacturers in Iowa got together and put an exhibit into the World's Fair in St. Louis. And it's kind of really the starting bell for manufacturing in Iowa. Just a few years after that, the federal government had legislation that said that employers were responsible for injuries to employees in the workplace. And so the folks that had a show in St. Louis stayed together, and they actually formed Employers Mutual Insurance to take care of workers' comp issues. And that started a real collaboration that it still exists today with ABI. And we take our role of advocating at the legislature with policymakers very seriously. So you can imagine, because we started as a manufacturing organization, manufacturers make up over 50% of our membership. We have a lot of other sectors that are involved, financial interests. You can see them in our architectural construction, a lot of training members, and hospitality membership as well. What we really talk about at the Capitol when we're having subcommittees and presenting ourselves is we use this graph quite often to let people understand what is a typical ABI member. An ABI member is typically involved in manufacturing. And you can see here with the orange and the blue large slices of the pie, almost 2/3 of ABI members have 100 or fewer employees. And so it kind of dispels that idea that we're the big business association.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, JD, for that introduction there. And here is the meat of the agenda for today. You just heard from JD a bit more about who ABI is and who that we serve. Beginning the program, we are going to have State Representative Taylor Collins with us from Mediapolis. He chairs the Higher Education Committee in the House, and he's going to provide a legislative update concerning his priorities for this past session, how he thought session went for his caucus and himself personally, and then kind of a preview of what he expects to see brought to the forefront of the conversation in 2026. And then you'll have the opportunity to ask him questions. And so we're very pleased to have him and appreciate his time. Following that, JD and I are going to be talking about the four biggest public policy issues from the Capitol this year. Many of you may be familiar with those, but we're going to refresh everyone and then provide an impact of how those things are going right now and what they're doing for your businesses. And then how the business community can remain engaged in our public policy process. We want your feedback, both members and non-members. We want to know what's on your minds, what's keeping you up at night. What do we need to be focused on going into next year? And so we'll be talking a bit more about that down the road here. And so I am pleased to introduce State Representative Taylor Collins. He represents House District 95, which is all of Louisa County and parts of Muscatine, Henry, and Des Moines counties in Southeast Iowa. He's in his second term as an Iowa House member. And as previously mentioned, he chairs the Higher Education Committee. And for somebody who's in their second term to chair a committee of that magnitude, that speaks volumes about his ability as a policymaker. And he's really been a very strong friend of ABI and business and industry in general, leading on key issues for us, especially during those caucus conversations that are had. And grateful that he could spend some time with us. And now I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thanks, Brad, JD. Thanks for all the work you guys do at the Capitol, really speaking on behalf of the business interests in the state. And we're lucky to have you guys, especially as we're dealing with some of these difficult issues. It was a interesting session. I wish I could say I enjoyed all of it. As JD would say, a veteran of the Capitol, you never really know the issues you're going to come across at the Capitol. Even the members don't know until you really get into the heat of the session. But there was some significant victories for ABI members this session. Probably the most significant one was unemployment insurance tax reform, cutting that taxable wage base in half and lowering the tax rates, which will estimate to save about $1.2 billion over the next 5 years. And this is the most important thing because this is not what you'll hear from some of the media. The solvency of the fund is very sound, even with these cuts. We were a state that had an unemployment trust fund that was larger than it needed to be. And that was an unnecessary tax on not only businesses, but ultimately employees, because that filters down into wages as well. So we were proud to see that get done. And really, hopefully, we can see those wage rates ratchet down here. And we also provide a mechanism if we do run into a high unemployment situation. Those will ratchet back up to ensure the solvency of the fund. So it was great to see that get done. And then something we've been talking about for years, I feel like we were talking about this, Brad, even before I was in the legislature, was drug and alcohol testing reform. My gosh, we just could not get that bill to the floor. It took a little bit of nudging folks along there to get that on the calendar. But luckily we did and finally got that done because prior to this, as you guys know, employers were considered guilty until proven innocent. And so this made them innocent until proven guilty. So it's great to get that done. Great for our employers. Because that was a common sense measure. Anybody who understands the legal system knows that it was necessary to get that done. Then obviously, the one loss this year that we've been talking a lot about, PBM reform. I've said that I support PBM reform, but quite frankly, this bill went way too far. And the thing I would describe what happened at the Capitol is really it was just an issue that was driven by emotions. Everybody was emotionally tied to their local pharmacy, whoever it may be. And they didn't want to see those folks close those pharmacies on Main Street. I get it. I have one in Mediapolis. But the problem with that bill was it was a giant tax hike for those constituents of ours who may want to save their local pharmacy, but they didn't realize they would end up having to pay more. So it's estimated that the healthcare mandate will cost us about $340 million. And so hopefully the lawsuit that ABI is leading can hopefully push that back. We were glad to see that injunction or stay put in place there. But hopefully we were successful because this just went too far. And I was one of those folks, one of the 11 in the House that voted against that bill because, like I said, I support PBM reform, but this just went way too far when it comes to a healthcare mandate. I'm not somebody that likes to push down government mandates. I'm not sure why my party decided to side with those folks this year. But those are some of the things that happened at the Capitol this year. The big thing we're looking at this next year, because we wrapped up session 2 months ago and we're already talking about the next one. It seems like we don't ever really get a break. The governor has formed the Iowa DOGE Task Force. We're watching to see the recommendations that come out of that. But this last year, the House and the Senate tried to lead on property tax reform. We couldn't get it across the finish line. And so I believe the governor's office has really taken that as an opportunity to put together a proposal themselves. And so we'll see what that property tax reform legislation looks like. It's something I continue to hear from ABI members about the importance of. We just need more predictability and reliability when it comes to our property tax system. We obviously need some mechanisms to encourage growth in economic development, but at the same time, we can't continue to just push down these increased prices and mandates to our employers and members. So, again, Brad and JD, thanks for the work you guys did this last year, and happy to answer any questions you guys may have. And I see a lot of familiar faces on the call today, so it's great to see a lot of you guys outside the legislative session.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask Representative Collins any questions you might have.
Representative Collins, I guess I'll kick it off here. First off, let me thank you for your service. I hope everyone can hear me. If someone could give me a nod, great.
Yes.
Growing up in Loiza County, I have a special appreciation of your constituents' opinions, so appreciate your service there. I want to talk today about, is there any consideration around workforce development with higher education specifically? I'm sure it's, it's much talked about when we're talking about economic development opportunities coming into the state of Iowa. They're looking for that workforce and that ready to work workforce. And obviously it's no secret, talked about a lot around partnerships between public and private companies around how do we develop that workforce more faster, more efficiently, and in areas where they're ready to grow. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the reasons why Speaker Grassley formed the Higher Education Committee last fall is he didn't feel like really some of these issues when it comes to workforce development and just efficiencies in the higher education space were really being dealt with. And so he wanted a committee solely focused on that. And looking at the members of my committee, you have some of our most influential committee chairs, House leadership on there. And so they're individuals that when we have a bill passed out of committee, people are put on notice. But when it comes to workforce development, just a couple of things we're working on right now. Number one is we have 3-year degrees that we have mandated the provost at each Regent University work on. That's not only a year less cost for students to pay for that, but that's a year less of education that ultimately employers have to wait for those workers to get out of education. And then the big thing we're working on this next year, and I hopefully will be getting a report from the Community College Association in November, is community college bachelor degrees. And I think, again, they'll also be focused on that 3-year degree space because the Higher Learning Commission, who accredits all of our Regent universities and our community colleges in the state, they have put out guidance on how to get accredited when it comes to a 3-year degree. And some folks will ask, well, how do you fit a 3-year degree in? Well, basically what's going on is they're whacking a lot of the liberal arts credits. Of course, there's value to that, but when we're in a workforce shortage, when we have a high cost of higher education, I just think it's important to provide those options to students. And then I've also mandated the provost to come back and report on Work Plus programs. There's been some colleges in Ohio that have really taken advantage of this. I've been made aware by the Board of Regents that some of these programs already exist, but they're not really advertising them to employers. And basically what that is you can go ahead, you as a business and a employee can sign a contract saying, if you go to school for this certain degree, whatever it may be, we will not only pay for it, but you have a job right after graduation. So really locking those students in to full-time employment immediately when they get out of the workforce. And so those are just some of the things that we're doing to kind of push the bureaucracy in the right direction when it comes to that space. But I think there's going to be some very positive things you're going to see come January. Not only are we going to get a report back on the 3-year degrees and the Work Plus from the regents, but I think the community college bachelor degrees really serve as an opportunity for a lot of ABI members because you guys are not just in the metros. We're talking about rural areas. Even if we're an hour, like if you're in Muscatine, an hour from the Quad Cities, there are some folks who simply will not go and get that skills training because they don't have the ability to take an hour off and drive up to the Quad Cities. And so I think there's some very positive things coming in the workforce development space this next year that ABI members should be excited about.
Great to hear. Thanks for those comments.
You bet. And hey, I always appreciate a Loiza County constituent. So.
Other questions or comments?
Doesn't have to be ABI related. There's a lot of things that happened this session I'd love to touch base on, just because a lot of the environment and the attitude around the Capitol really affects other priorities that we're trying to deal with. Even if they're things that are really not even that contentious for our caucus, they certainly affect the list of priorities.
Well, I'll jump in again, I guess. So, obviously, property tax reform, it
Yeah.
was on a lot of people's minds, hotly contested. And as you know, one of the investor-owned utilities in the state of Iowa, with our partner municipalities, there was a lot of concern, a lot of opinions, a lot of really kind of just wondering, okay, how is this going to turn out? Curious your thoughts on how that played out, and if you could speculate on what you see to come.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to the property tax issue, we quickly learned that it's a little bit more complicated than we think. We started trying to unpack all the different band-aids that were put on over the last 20 years, and we quickly realized that in order to really reform the system, you're going to have to not only remove all those 20 different band-aids from the wound, but you got to clean the wound itself. And so I think this next year, what you're going to see is basically a total revamp of the system. Like I said, you have to really remove a lot of these mechanisms and band-aids that were put in place over the years in order to fundamentally change the system, such as the rollback. That's one of the things we heard from municipalities, counties, and other folks, that it simply doesn't work anymore. There certainly was a time where it worked, and some would say it has worked to tamp down property tax increases for residential during times of high inflation, but it's not really providing predictability when it comes to budgeting. Really, what you're seeing is kind of the up and down and up and down that you don't want to see in public finance. What we want to do, and I think the direction we're going, and you saw the governor kind of starting to message this last week, is just simply an expenditure cap, making sure that we're not spending more than 2 or 3% annually. It's okay. We got to make sure that we're allowing these folks to adjust for inflation, but we cannot have 5, 10, 15% annualized increases, because not only is that unsustainable, but it compounds every single year. And then when it comes to commercial, some folks are concerned about the commercial space when it comes to the rollback not applying to them. They're wondering if maybe we should do just a similar rollback all across the board. And honestly, if we do an expenditure cap, I'm not sure we even need a rollback. And so for some folks, I'm probably already lost you here, but this is just how complicated the property tax system has become. It's broken, it doesn't work. And we also are going to have to take a look at, I think, if we're serious about really lowering the bill, is looking at the school funding formula. That's the elephant in the room that no one's really been willing to talk about yet, because that's where 50% of your property taxes go. And that 540 levy for schools, we have the ability, if we really wanted to, if we think we have the money to do it, is to lower that levy rate and just have the state general fund absorb more of that rather than property taxpayers. And that would actually result in a lower property tax bill, not just curbing the increase annually. So I'm hoping that the governor rolls out a good plan that we can start working on right away. Last year, I felt like the conversations really didn't pick up until late March. And at that point, when you're dealing with this complicated of an issue, it's just too late to really reach a conclusion.
I appreciate that, and I apologize for the follow-up. I'm not meaning to monopolize your time, but specifically, there are, we've just heard a few comments around the concern around the TIF program, and just there's some concern that takes away the ability for municipalities to draw in economic development. I think that's a lot of speculation, but curious your thoughts on, I know that program is kind of hotly contested in areas of Iowa. What are your thoughts?
Oh, no, I don't think it's speculation, Brad. I think that's the honest answer. I mean, there was a bill that came out of the Senate that basically would have imploded TIF, quite frankly. The House decided not to move that bill forward. I don't think it was the solution. And while I would agree, I also serve as the economic development director for my county. We use TIF a lot. In fact, we just landed a large expansion of a manufacturer here locally because of TIF. But there's obviously TIF abuse going on when it comes to the never-ending TIF districts, basically entire cities you've seen in TIF districts. There's no doubt there's abuse going on, but really the question has been over the last decade is how do you fix that without just imploding the entire system? And I think that's what that bill did. And so I think you are going to see similar to what we did with abatements a few years ago in 2023, I think it was, where we deal with the 540 levy. and the perpetual TIF districts. But beyond that, I hope we don't take too drastic moves and just totally upend the system, because I think there was some bills out there that would have done exactly that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rich
Go
has
ahead,
got a
Rich.
question, I see.
Representative Collins, appreciate all your help and everything that you've done this last session. It's been phenomenal.
You bet.
One of the things I agree with you on the TIF side, that's extremely important for us in these smaller communities and different things. But I want to get your take on the housing side of the things, as far as where you see things coming down the pipe for some housing. It's a big issue in Muscatine that we're trying to strive for on improving and increasing housing. We're actually doing a little bit of TIF in order to help for developers. But other things that you might see that could be potentials to benefit on the housing side of things?
Yeah. Well, I was hoping this last year we would have increased the workforce housing tax credit more than we did. Unfortunately, it was kind of thrown into the conversation when it comes to overall business incentives. And so everybody kind of had a final number we had to get underneath. And so we didn't increase as much as we did, although this next fiscal year, we did boost it a little bit to deal with some of that pent up demand that we saw throughout the pandemic. When it comes to housing, I think that's our best tool is that workforce housing tax credit. And then if we can go ahead and layer on top of that either TIF or abatements, I think that's very important. But when it comes to housing, I think honestly the best thing we can do right now, Rich, is honestly just play defense when it comes to those incentives. There's some folks that want to get rid of them. Some folks, I think, who are in larger metros that don't understand the importance of them, because that's really where a lot of those incentives are most important. I wouldn't say that Burlington or Muscatine or Mount Pleasant is small, but they're certainly smaller than some of these areas. You're seeing rapid growth where you can see, 50 homes being built by a developer. We just can't do that scale. And so that's where those incentives really become important, is so you can do, a 10 or 15 home subdivision and still be able to pique the interest of those developers.
No, absolutely true, and appreciate that. That's kind of where we're heading the directions at on this end. So all that is beneficial. Absolutely.
I mentioned
Great
this to
question.
Representative Collins before others came on, but Brad is our ABI Vice Chair on the ABI Executive Committee, and Rich also serves on the ABI Board of Directors. So we have some great partners here on the call as well, and like I said, with the sponsors as well. But I wanted to mention that to others of you on the Zoom, that those individuals are representatives of your area on the ABI Board of Directors. Julie, did you have a question? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I did not.
Perfect. Wasn't
But
sure.
it's good to
so-
see everybody again.
Good to see you,
as well.
Julie.
JD and Brad, you and I have talked about this here, but and one thing that I think all of you probably hear, but Representative Collins, just to share with you, we've had several conversations as we've been out on the road with our members, specifically about higher education, but workforce training. Really looking forward to those additional conversations. What I've heard from some of our manufacturing members is when they're getting applicants to come in, that they're not able to pass remedial math. They don't know how to use a tape measure. So some of those situations, you mentioned the drug testing. There was an employer that had a career fair that they needed to pass 8th grade math and pass a drug test. Out of 100 applicants, 4 were able to do both. So even though we are seeing softening in the economy, we just sent out our 3rd quarter economic survey. We released that today. We are, continuing to see softening, but our members are still talking to us about workforce and how that relates to education, higher education, or even just basic training. So I wanted to share that anecdotal information with you while we had you this morning, because I've been hearing it from so many others. I was just on the road actually in your area yesterday and heard it from 2 different companies, both in Southeast Iowa and then in Fairfield as well. So, but really appreciate your time, Brad. I just wanted to mention that. I'll kick it over to you because see if there's anything else.
When
Yeah,
it
you
comes to
bet.
workforce training, I would say one thing I would just encourage the members to keep tuned into is I think that there are some conversations about reforms to the job training 260 and 260F program currently administered by the community colleges. I believe even the governor's Doge task force is taking a little bit of a look at that. So I would just encourage your members to stay engaged on that. If there's a way that we can tweak those programs to make them more beneficial to you guys, please let us know, because we want to make sure we're using every tool in our arsenal, make sure you guys have the workforce you guys need to grow, expand, and be successful, especially in kind of a softening of the manufacturing space.
Great questions and comments. Do we have any final questions or comments for Representative Collins?
I'll give him a softball one here. Representative Collins, good to see you.
Good to see you, Andrew.
Wondering if there are any issues that you're either hearing from constituents or your colleagues about that might get some play next year that really didn't get a lot of attention last year, kind of an emerging issue.
Oh man, I mean the just the one issue that continues to be talked about, honestly, that we didn't talk about today is just the carbon pipeline issue. And as I shared, even if your members don't have a position on it, that issue affects everything else going on in the session. So that's just the one other issues I think that ABI members need to be aware of, because it just affects the entire attitude and temperament of the session. And so that's the one thing that I continue to hear come up, especially from my colleagues in Northern Iowa, Northwest Iowa, and even in some of Southwest Iowa a little bit.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. Well, Representative Collins, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today and talking to our members, and thank you for your support of the business community. We greatly appreciate it. Feel free to stay on for the rest of the program if you'd like, or if you can jump off if you want to. But thanks again for doing that. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And if you have any workforce ideas, any kind of ideas like that, my email is online. Make sure to reach out and let us know. We want to make sure we're serving you guys. But yeah, thank you guys again, JD, Brad, and the team for all the work you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
There we go.
All right. Okay, that was a great review of session. It's so much easier to hear directly from a participant than really have Brad and I try to give you a readout. But that's what we're going to try to do right now. We want to give you from the ABI perspective the issues that were of high importance this past year. The top one I'm going to talk about is the Pharmacy Price Control Bill, the PBM bill, Senate File 383. It is still making news. ABI took the position in every subcommittee that we were in and testifying before the Senate, before the House, and with the governor as we talked to her post-session. We're always putting alternatives on the table to help small, rural, independent pharmacies. These are people that serve the ABI membership. At the beginning of the talk here, we talked about how ABI members are less than 100 members. Well, they're also typically suburban or rural as well when you get down to the averages of what is an ABI member. So those are important people to serve our employees. But that's not what the bill did. And you heard Representative Collins saying that this bill had a very strange momentum of its own based on emotion. ABI identified four price and cost pressures that were in that bill. It would allow any pharmacy to become a specialty pharmacy and kind of eliminate the economies of scale of selecting one or very few pharmacies to take that role. And that was a huge cost point. There also had a price setting mechanism that was a national average that was figured out for the cost of drugs, plus a $10.68 dispensing fee. And then they also had a device that the drug manufacturers like to employ where they can, that would get a copay accumulator that would allow for upfront couponing for the cost of drugs at the counter that could be used by employees, but then the costs of all those drugs would then roll over onto the plan itself. And so all members would start paying more when that device was used. Happy to say that pursuant to a lawsuit that was filed by ABI and other litigants, that we are now enjoined, the state is enjoined from enforcing that on the people that were involved in the lawsuit. So that's every ABI member, and the people that they use for insurance and PBMs are also protected by this injunction. So it was long in coming. We had to have a temporary restraining order before we could get to the point where we get an injunction. Now that injunction has been challenged by the state of Iowa in the appeals court. This is all at the federal level. So this will continue to roll on. I think it was a great move by our board of directors to decide that there was enough going on in this bill that we had to push back. The just kind of the three things that were done in the lawsuit. We compared the Iowa law to the federal ERISA law that really has an explicit carve out saying that health plans of large employers that will be doing business perhaps in more than one state should only have one set of rules. And they said that they have supremacy over the rulemaking over the states. And so much of the law fell away because of the preemption of the federal law over state law. There's also parts of the bill that said that if there's a cheaper pharmacy and a more expensive pharmacy, employers were enjoined. They could not tell their employees which was which to help them save money. And that was found by the district court to violate the First Amendment commercial speech. And then finally, that the dispensing fee that was included in the bill, the court found that when they pulled all the other pieces of the bill out, that the severability clause that was in the legislation, they just could not allow that to be operative because the dispensing fee then had the opposite effect of helping small rural independent pharmacies, because now it's going to be known that they were more expensive than their other counterparts in the marketplace, and that could actually be harmful to them. So they voided that portion of the severability clause, and for ABI members and the other litigants removed that. So all that really survives of the cost pieces that were in the original bill was an appeal process that we're waiting to figure out how the insurance commissioner will develop that. But it's a place for the pharmacy to go if they feel that they've been given a reimbursement rate that was lower than their cost of procuring drugs. So that was the smallest of the cost points, but it did survive the court review. Rich, I see you have a hand up. Is that leftover? Is that new?
No, that's new. I had a question
Okay.
on that. So with this being a federally case based on this now, how does this impact the other states like West Virginia that this bill was modeled after and some of those others that have gone through with the PBM legislation? Is that plays factor into them, or is it strictly to the state of Iowa?
Well, really, if you're taking a look at what's the state of litigation at the federal level, you had the Eighth Circuit make an opinion that said that that much of the things that were similar in an Oklahoma law to what was in the Iowa law, that they should be removed from the Oklahoma law. That was appealed to the Supreme Court from district court, and that was not taken up by the Supreme Court. So that Eighth Circuit ruling says that anything that goes into plan design for ERISA style insurance programs does not survive that preemption test, and it goes away. Now, what I have a feeling will happen is I think the parties will probably take this 10th Circuit case all the way up the same way, and it'll either affirm and be similar to the 8th Circuit, or you'll have a case where the 8th and the 10th disagree on some points, and then that might be ripe for Supreme Court review. But that is a non-attorney's view of things, and it certainly is not our litigation strategy. It's just an observation from a guy that works at the Capitol about what might happen in courthouses. So, but yeah, I think we have to be very pleased with the court actions that we've received so far, even as far as the pharmacies and other national organizations wanting to get the right to put amicus briefs into the procedural move of an injunction, and the court saying, no, stay out of the way while we're working on this injunction. You can talk about it when we get to the real case, but you don't belong in that case. So the court has been fairly consistent with what's gone on in the 8th Circuit as well. So I feel pretty good that there's going to be a decision much like the 8th Circuit out of the 10th. They were certainly very, very careful. Just a week before they were to do the oral work in front of the 10th Circuit, the U.S. Supreme Court came out with a decision really limiting the way you do injunctions to try to keep it as narrow as possible. And so the court picked up a 4-day-old precedent, and when they said this only applied to ABI members and the other named litigants, that was in response to that 4-day-old case that said you have to have a very narrow injunction. So they're watching what's going on in other jurisdictions very closely, watching what their Supreme Court precedents are now. We don't have any timelines yet on what now will happen in the appeals court, what the timing of those pleadings and the paperwork that needs to be filed and the oral opportunities. We don't know that timeline yet, but it's forthcoming. But for the meantime, everybody on this call that's an ABI member is living in the old world and not the new law. Any other questions on this one? That is a pretty big one. We've had more involvement on this issue than we've had in other issues for a long time. So we can answer that, or we can do it at the back end. Okay, I'll take that as my signal to move on. Representative Collins did a nice job of laying out the property tax bill. There were 3 property tax bills that were put forward by the reformers at the Capitol, and they all followed a similar theme. So I think this is our jumping off spot going into the next session. The idea that they had was to put an expenditure limitation on local subdivisions, so cities, counties, schools, and then over time, eliminate the rollback, which rejiggers the property tax responsibilities that the different classes of property have every year, and then finally take over a portion of education funding that had been done by property taxes and make it a state responsibility. That's where the relief was being sent. So each one of the 3 bills that was introduced had all of those features. It was just how long do you take to eliminate a rollback? How much do you put into state dollars? Do you put into education funding? Those were the tweaks that were going on, and that was the part that Taylor was talking about that became very convoluted, more difficult than they were anticipating. So I think the next thing to do is add in any of the findings that the DOJ committee can come up with that can be immediately adopted, streamlining of local government to try to capture those savings, and then kind of move forward working off of that template of eliminate the rollback over time, take up some of the property tax spending by state dollars, and have an expenditure limitation. I would expect that is going to be the broad strokes of what's going to be coming next year. ABI's going in goal on any discussion on property taxes has always been to encourage change because the current system is broken. And then once we've said that, as you do change, be respectful of not trying to figure out how to afford one class of property a reduction by having an increase in another form. So don't raid commercial industrial rates in order to come up with a juicy homeowners property tax cut. So that has been a principle that was adopted by the reformers last year. We're going to make sure that everybody stays there so that everybody can enjoy any kind of relief we can get, and anybody can enjoy any kind of simplification that we can get. So if there are no questions on property, I'm going to switch to Brad.
You bet. Thank you, JD. Another key issue that Representative Collins highlighted was the passage of Senate File 607, which is unemployment insurance premium or tax reform. And as the representative noted, this is a $1.2 billion tax cut over 5 years for unemployment insurance taxes. And really, how do you get to a position where you're able to do something like that and keep the trust fund sustainable. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the history of unemployment insurance and the trust fund in Iowa and really kind of how we got to this moment in time. So if you go back to March of 2020 when COVID strikes and everything shuts down across the country and the world, Iowa is one of the first states to reopen. We get opened back up in June of 2020. The governor has strong leadership there. And the Congress and president approve federal COVID packages that contain significant amounts of money for states to utilize for a variety of purposes. Governor Reynolds decides to take $727 million through two COVID packages in 2020 and 2021 and infuse that into our unemployment insurance trust fund. At the time, the fund was bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars to those who were unemployed through no fault of their own. And surely businesses were going to see massive tax hikes beginning the following year when the new rates are established. But with the governor's action right there, putting in $750 million, those hikes did not come to fruition, thankfully. In June of 2021, the governor decides to end the federal bonus unemployment insurance benefits, which is something that ABI strongly supported because we know that there are many jobs available and people seeking work. So she took that decisive action to do that. In early 2022, Governor Reynolds and Iowa Workforce Development come together and establish the Reemployment Case Management Program, which takes a career counselor and puts them with a claimant in the first week of unemployment and tries to help that person with one-on-one assistance to ensure that they can find a new work, a new occupation as soon as possible so that they aren't lingering on unemployment and they're finding work that pays more than unemployment benefits. So that's a great thing right there. And then during the 2022 legislative session, Governor Reynolds spearheads the most significant overhaul of the unemployment insurance system in decades in Iowa. A key part of that bill was taking the maximum amount of weeks somebody could be on unemployment from 6 months, 26 weeks, down to 4 months, which is 16 weeks, something that we strongly supported. That legislation also enhanced the suitable work requirements that gets people back to work faster, also modernized part of the code language with how it is supposed to be interpreted by judges when there are challenges to that. So all of those changes have put Iowa in a position where the average claimant is going back to work in 9.5 weeks, which is the fastest reemployment time since they've been keeping stats since the 60s. And so that just kind of sets the stage for this legislation that the governor brought forward this year, which slashed the unemployment insurance taxable wage base from about $40,000 down to about $20,000, which will be set in 2026. Iowa Workforce Development estimates that that is going to be a 40 to 60% tax reduction for employers who pay unemployment insurance tax beginning next year, which is very significant. Half of the employers in Iowa don't pay UI tax because they don't have experience, but for those who do, you should see significant reduction in the tax that you pay. It also collapses tax rates for all varieties of tables and then ranks, kind of simplifies the system as well. And so JD and I, when we get on calls with other manufacturing associations or chambers of commerce and kind of describe what's happened in Iowa over the last 5 years on unemployment, everybody is extremely jealous, to be frank, and envious about what policymakers have been able to accomplish here in the state of Iowa. So that's hats off to policymakers, hats off to Governor Reynolds for doing great things in this space. The next bullet is drug and alcohol testing reform, and Representative Collins also highlighted this. I want to provide just a little bit more detail. And this legislation that became law this year is a fine example of ABI's public policy process coming into action and getting a key piece of legislation done. A few years ago, our Workplace and Product Safety Committee convened in August to talk about some challenges related to this part of the code. We formed a subcommittee which came up with some recommendations to try to tackle. And after a few years of educating policymakers, we were able to get that done this year. The biggest piece, as previously mentioned, was flipping the burden of proof to the plaintiff to prove that the employer violated the law. Prior to this, employers were presumed guilty until proven innocent. We flipped that back. It also modernizes communication methods for how employers and employees exchange drug and alcohol testing results. Right now, the employer has to utilize certified mail return receipt requested. Now, the new law allows employers to still offer that same method, but they can also offer the in-person exchange or the electronic exchange of testing results to employees. The employee still gets to decide at the end of the day. So if they like current law, or the old law, nothing changes, but if they say for the sake of speeding up the process, give it to me in person or electronically, they can do that. So that helps both sides there. It also tightens up the definition of safety sensitive position related to how jobs are classified for the purposes of drug and alcohol testing. We had a member company a few years ago had a bad outcome at the Supreme Court because they thought they were classifying jobs in their warehouse as safety sensitive positions. A court came in and said otherwise. And so with this new definition, we make it crystal clear that employers can define these jobs that way, which is good. And then finally, it does establish an evidentiary standard for the plaintiff when proving their case. This is the preponderance of the evidence, which is a common evidentiary standard for civil cases. Prior to this, technical violations were being used to win cases against employers, and that should no longer be the case with this evidentiary standard. So this bill and this new law is an example of ABI's public policy process working, and we're proud that it got done this year. And I think at this moment we'll take any questions about these 4 issues if anybody has any. If not, we will move on.
Just a real quick sounding of where we are on our policy process. This is inflection day when we kind of move from looking back at the 2025 session and begin really with these regional meetings. This is the second of 5 where we really start looking forward and start collecting information here in these meetings today. But then also we have 5 public policy committee meetings coming up in August, which we'll go over. And then once our policy committee meetings have met, we do have a legislative committee that sits on top of those committees, really kind of sorting out to make sure that there's no tensions between the proposals from the different committees. And then they also put in front of the board of directors the policy priorities that the board then consider and adopt our priorities that we will take into the next legislative session. So that's all coming up right now. Go ahead, Brad. And then this is where we need your input. And the members that are on this Zoom have done a good job, and we want you to keep it up, of sending us your issue experts. You can see the dates here. These are not in any particular order. But starting in August on the 5th with workplace and product safety down there at the bottom, and then working through the other meetings for economic growth. This is where we need your input on incentives. That we just had an incentive package that passed last year, rejiggering the tax incentives for businesses. How is that working? If there are things that need to be tweaked going in, we need to hear from you. We have economic growth. We'll be sending out, we've already sent one email around the energy space, getting people involved in reconsidering our energy policy statement. And we'll see if we need to do more work there on that as a sidebar to this. So really on economic growth, those are the types of issues that we're looking for feedback. Brad used a turn of phrase earlier in this that I kind of got hung on. What keeps you up at night? What are those things that worry you as employers, as manufacturers, as other business types that are barriers that we can work on smoothing for you? Those are the things we want to hear about. In employment workforce, we get around the childcare spaces. We had great question on workforce training and recruitment. We really think we need to do a big dive in that. It's nice to hear that the DOGE committee is looking at the 260E and 260F programs. Frankly, they've kind of invited themselves to be reviewed because their funding stream is a diminishing income tax level, and they go off of a percentage of payroll taxes, and as that lowers, so does the support for those programs. So they've got to figure out and reimagine a way to get funding underneath that and other things. So we'll be working with the employment committee to try to figure out the input that we need to do. Send your experts there. The environment committee is one that meets more often than just in the August timeframe. Every year we have more information going back and forth on the state of regulatory affairs with the DNR and others there. What do we need to be doing? I think we're going to have an eye-opening presentation there, because it's anticipated that the budget that will be in front of Congress from the Trump administration will not anticipate as much federal money flowing down for the regulatory functions at the DNR. How do we fix that? If we're left with that at the state level, these are things that we need to get engaged in. Send your experts. The tax issues, we've got the property taxes teed up for this year. We have also the rolling conformity in Iowa. What remains to be seen, since Iowa decided a few years ago we're going to adopt whatever the federal government does in income taxes, it puts on autopilot the decisions on things that can really reduce the revenues to the state of Iowa. We'll be hearing from a national expert on how these things work in front of the tax committee. But we really could be in a position where the Iowa will be looking to maybe perhaps decouple from some of these ideas that have passed at the federal level just because they need the revenues to sustain. We will need to be busy in that space. So come and get educated on that in front of the tax committee. So you can go to our ABI events page. It's listed down there at the bottom. Get yourself or somebody else from your company involved in these. They'll all be held here at ABI. It just really lends itself better to have in person when we're really getting into these conversations. So that's an invitation, but also on this list, are there any issues that anybody wants to bring up at this point that we should be recording and taking to our policy committees? And don't be shy. We've been taking notes, and we have some of this workforce training issues and things that have come up in questions we've noted already. Anything? All right. Well, very good.
Okay. Well, thank you,
JD.
Actually,
Go ahead.
Whoops.
I'll just real quickly. This is Ryan Semp over in the Quad Cities. On the topic of economic growth, something that I would throw out there to think about is site readiness funding. That's something that we know is a national issue, that we lack shovel-ready sites. And as the Trump administration is really focusing on reshoring manufacturing and jobs, we need sites available to land those projects and land those companies in the United States and in Iowa. We don't usually point to Illinois as a good metric, but this last year they did pass $200 million for site readiness funding. So getting land from, potentially green space up to something that's got all the studies done, has infrastructure extended to the site. That's something that we'd like to see Iowa look more closely at, going beyond the certified sites program that they have, that really just kind of says yes or no whether you check the box, to actually helping to fund developers getting to that point.
Very good input. Thank you, Ryan. Others? Okay, then. I think, Brad, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, JD. And thanks for that input, Ryan. We appreciate that. There are several ways to get involved in ABI. JD just talked about our public policy committee meetings. They're set to meet in August, so we hope that you or somebody from your company can attend those. We do have our executive open golf outing at the end of August, which is going to be at Glen Oaks Golf and Country Club, which is one of the premier clubs in Iowa. So that's always a fun event to attend. And something new this year is our Elevate Iowa Advanced Manufacturing Tour, which we're going to be going across the state at the beginning of October through mid-October, and we're excited to visit manufacturers and those who are making a significant impact in communities across Iowa. And we'll be having policymakers attend those meetings who are in the area, and so just really educating the public and about the presence of manufacturing in Iowa and really what the industry does to support families and communities. And so we're very pleased to be putting this on, and hope that you can be a part of it. And then we will conclude that with our Iowa Manufacturing Conference, which is going to take place in Altoona at Prairie Meadows. And that's a one-day event where we have workshops and we have great speakers. And so check that out on our events page. You'll want to register for that as well. Our legislative briefing and reception, which is always one of our premier public policy events, that's going to be in January, January 14th, in Des Moines downtown. We usually have about 400 to 500 people attend that. We have several policymakers from both parties attend that, and so it is worth your while to come on out for that reception and briefing, and you'll get a preview of what's going to happen during session from JD and I. Then you'll have a chance to interact with your local policymakers. And then finally, Business Day in Des Moines. The date hasn't been set yet, but over the last couple of years, we've been bringing policymakers to ABI members, and the last couple of years we've had about 200 members attend this event where we've had Governor Reynolds. We've been honored to have her presence where she's spoken and taken some questions, along with the majority leaders and minority leaders in both chambers. They've taken time to brief ABI members about the status of where things are in the legislative session. And it's really a great time because we do this right after the second funnel when kind of everything is starting to clear the decks and we're figuring out what the final focus of the legislature looks like. So more to come on that, but some great events that you should attend throughout the year. And then the biggest thing is establishing a relationship with your local legislator. You can do that through the events that we have. You can invite them to tour your business, attend forums that they have during session. Policymakers want to hear from you. They tell us that all the time, and they want to see you. They want to learn more about your business, what you're doing. And so reach out to them. And if you need any assistance in facilitating a contact, JDI are more than happy to help do that. And then finally, you can stay connected with us on social media through Facebook, X, or Twitter. We're often tweeting about the latest with what's going on. And then if you do have any questions after we're concluded today, you can email JD or I right there. There are our email addresses. And I think we have time for any questions if anybody has any at this time.
Brad, I think just to your point too about establishing that relationship, so many of you on the Zoom this morning already have that relationship. But for those of you that don't, I think this, the example of the PBM is the pharmacy price control, it's a very good example of why those relationships are important. I think that we would have even seen an even worse bill, which is hard to believe if it wasn't for all the calls that you all made and the personal interactions that you had with the legislators. And, today, for example, Representative Collins, very good example of someone who listened to his constituents. And so as we see these new elected officials that JD and Brad have developed relationships with, we always say on the business side, our political action committee supports a Republican, a Democrat, a Whig, or a Tory if they support business issues. And right now, the trend that we're seeing, not just in our state, but in other states, I'm not sharing anything that most of you haven't heard before, is that it's really hard to find some pro-business legislators. And so developing those relationships early is important. And so we don't have anything else for you today. We just appreciate your time, appreciate your support. Hope to see you or many of your colleagues at our upcoming policy committee meetings. If there's nothing else, we'll let you go and get you back a couple minutes of your day. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.